last year I started a new job where I was transitioning from a Java developer to a Golang developer. My first task was to migrate and find out how we can build the structure for the new project that had to be built in Golang and how we can migrate all the microservices from Java. And my first impression was that we have to build again microservices in Golang, but with the whole structure that Golang has, which is less complex than Java, our final decision was to build a modular monolith in Golang. And one of the things that we had first in mind was how we can do the whole internal communication between modules and how we can have modular monolith where later we can just say scrap it, we can just take one module and build its own application or just transition it from its own application. That easy in theory. But in thoughts, I just want you to understand a bit on the Escalidro, and then I can show you one of the projects that I have actually built. So the idea was that we have multiple microservices right now in Java, and then with those microservices, we just want to scrap them and build one project in Golang. The first problem was that we wanted to build that because we were spending a lot of money and a lot of resources, and some of the services were not even used for like 1-2 days because we don't have a lot of customers. Like you don't have 1 million customers and say like, okay, all those microservices are heavy use and they really need their own instance in general. But the idea was that we can actually do something simpler where we can build one project with the idea that later we can take one piece of that project and have its own piece in general. So let's say we have these microservices here. This is what we actually have right now in Java. And we just want to build this big boy here in Golang. And one of the things that our Java projects have is that we have this client here. I will just have a different color where it just communicates with all the services. But let's say this is the authentication service, and this is another one which is image service where you upload images. Then for the image, we have internally speaking, we have another microservice which processes those images with the idea of finding corona events, different, let's say, different patterns, and find its position of the image based on the metadata. Complex service that has to process this image, but it's internally. So our client will not communicate with it. So we have to communicate through different protocols. The well-known protocol that probably everybody knows nowadays, it's, let's say, HTTP. I think that's the easiest one. Actually, leave me in the comments what protocol do you know or do you think it's the well-known one nowadays. Okay, the idea is we have this one which can be called image work, and we'll just scrap this because we have a nice example here. But the idea is here we have an internal communication between a microservice that the client communicates with and another one that our image microservice communicates with. And how we can do that in Golang so that we are not screwed later when we have to migrate that specific module to its own instance. So what we have done was to have this big boy as a Golang project where we took our authentication. Actually, let me copy it like that. And then we took our image as well. And then we take also the image worker. We'll just move it here and do, guess what, the same thing. We just have one project, but with the idea that we build separate modules that communicate internally between them with a HTTP client. And maybe now I can show you exactly how we solved this problem with showing you one of the projects that I'm actively building, having those thoughts in mind when I first started building it. Okay, so now we are logged in. The idea is that in this application, you can start your own chat, teachers, you can create your own teacher, you have different settings, you have the part with subscription, which is hooked to Stripe, you have different user preferences, you can delete your account. So there are a few things that that you can build as a modules that are responsible for one thing. That can be user, that can be preferences, that can be teachers, that can be chat in general, chat messages, that can be subscription, a few things. So now I will show you a bit more code, which is more technical. But the idea behind, which I started with when I built this project, was to have two different ports for first public facing endpoints and one for admin facing endpoints. So what does it mean? It means that when you first deploy and you build the infrastructure for this project, you just expose the port that publicly it's facing the client, the one that you want to have it internally where all the modules are talking between. You just don't expose it, and the modules will know that they have to talk internally with the admin port that you have configured in this config YAML example file. Let me show you one example. So if we see the code here, we can see that we have authentication, chat, notification, preferences, subscription, teacher and teachers, and user modules. The idea is that even though we have the user, which is responsible with handling all the users, creating, updating, and so on, we also have one for authentication, which is only responsible for the authentication part, which other parts of the system can interact with. So the idea behind is that you first start creating this authentication client, which basically has a lot of methods that just calls through HTTP, an admin endpoint, and I will show you in a bit. But as you can see here, we have the client. And then if we go to the specific module configuration for this client, we can see here that we have public routes, we have protected routes, and then we have admin routes. We are interested more in the admin routes because if we go to the admin routes, we have routes such as users and the ID to get the specific user, to get the specific user by the email, to increment the teacher count for the specific user, and then to validate the token for the specific user when we authenticate. So if we go to one of them, let's say we go to this one, and then we go back to the client, and then we just copy paste it, we can see here that we have this get user by email, which calls the same endpoint that we have seen before in authentication handler, where it just passes one email from the parameters. Rest is just the specific path of the admin endpoint. So if we go back, we can also see here in the implementation that it actually expects the email. So this is actually the routing implementation or the endpoint implementation for this specific method for getting the client by email. When we think about it, is that we have this module out that then its client. If we go here inside modules, we can see that this specific authentication module is created first, and then its client is passed, for example, in the teachers. And if we go inside the teachers, then we can see that that user client that was passed, it's actually used in onboarding service. And how this is used, if we go here, then we can see that after finalizing the onboarding, it actually increments the teacher count. Because I didn't show you a lot of functionality from the application, but that maybe it's for another video. But the idea behind is that when you finalize an onboarding, that onboarding is specific for a teacher that will be created after that. So it also needs to increment the teacher count directly inside the authentication module. So if we have that, the only thing that we are bounded with this authentication module is just the authentication client. So what we can do right now with these teachers modules, we can just take it in another project, just theoretically speaking, we can just take it in another module, have the same structure, follow the same structure that we have here for specific things regarding the migrations, configuration, and so on. And then we can just take also the client, which is already created in this specific module, and then we are good to go. We can have another service server with only teachers. And why you would do that in general? It's because the idea of having the modular monolith is that you just create the services, and by time seeing which one uses more resources, you think, okay, let's just take it out and have its own dedicated server for that. Because the main problem that we had was that having a lot of microservices, and I think we had around 20 microservices, made it so that it was so hard in general to work with it locally speaking or developing something new, but also when you want to debug something and a bug it's happening. So concluding this example or video, having this modular monolith helps you with building pragmatically in the beginning with the idea of having it scalable in the future. That's it, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you like this video. If you like it, don't forget to leave a like and a comment, and see you in the next video. Bye.